Hello and welcome to the Next in Line podcast, where we are helping to prepare you for whatever is next in line. As always, I'm your host, Chance Pitts, and I would like to thank you for tuning in to this episode. Guys and girls, first and foremost, I would like to apologize for the audio quality of this episode. You're going to notice a huge difference in the typical audio quality that we have and the quality we have this time around. That's because, as many of y'all know, I play a little bit of music on the side, and we had a gig in Central Texas this past weekend. And we've got another one coming up next weekend, so I figured rather than trucking all of our gear back down here, I would leave it up at my folks' place in Central Texas. And one of the things I forgot to grab out of that bunch of equipment is my microphone. I use it for both things, and it happened to not make the trip back with me. So that's the reason we're having some audio issues. I apologize in advance. But guys, while the quality from a sound standpoint is going to be a little bit different in this episode, I promise you that we're going to still bring the same quality message that we always do, if not better, in this particular episode. So make sure you're staying tuned for that, guys. Additionally, as always, if you receive value from this episode or any other episode that we put out on the podcast here at Next in Line, please make sure you are sharing that message with like-minded individuals who might receive the same kind of value. Then, guys, make sure that you are subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. Leave a rating or review for us if you don't mind. Those right there are going to be the best way for us to grow and reach the largest audience possible, and in effect help the most people possible, because that's our overall goal here, is to just help people deal with whatever is next in line for them. Last thing I'm going to drop to y'all guys is you can check us out on social media. You can keep up with all the craziness, all the daily action we have going on, and the motivation. And that's at Next in Line Development on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So guys, now that we've got that out of the way, there's a huge topic that I wanted to dive into with y'all today. It's one that I've struggled with personally for a very long time, and it's one that I've had many people reach out to me on as well with issues of their own. And because of that, I thought it would be a very good topic for us to dive into today. And that huge topic, guys, is addiction. Now, I understand there's no way that we can cover the full topic of addiction within this one show, but we're going to go ahead and highlight a few of the important themes and the issues associated with addiction, and then some strategies of how to recognize and overcome addiction as well. And then, guys, if it's something y'all are interested in, let me know on social media. Shoot me a message, and maybe we can put out a supplemental episode at a later time on this subject as well. But with that, guys, I want to go ahead and dive into our podcast. So oftentimes we think about addiction and we think about drugs, or we think about alcohol or sex or some other kind of vice that's rolled into what I would call a general negative connotation of the word addiction. And for the most part, guys, that negative connotation is correct. We know that addiction is defined as the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. And typically, anything you do that you have an addiction to is something that you either don't have control over, or that at the very least you have a very unhealthy relationship with that thing. We also know that we live in a society today where addictions are not only found in those big three, the drugs, the alcohol, and the sex, but it's also found in other places as well. These other places can include food consumption, addiction to our phone or other devices, addiction to gratification within our jobs, and even addiction to physical activity such as weightlifting or running. We say that a lot in the social media accounts that we see on the Instagram Reels, the YouTube Shorts, the TikToks we see out there. We see a ton of young kids getting addicted to weightlifting as a coping mechanism. And guys, like I was saying, we use these different things as coping mechanisms for stress relief, to cure boredom, or to even just remove ourselves from the uncomfortable reality that we find ourselves in sometimes. And oddly enough, guys, sometimes we even get addicted to the pain or the negative feelings that we find ourselves dealing with in these situations of our lives. Now, that's something that can take a very, very bad turn very quickly. It can be depressing, and it can move in a fast downward spiral very quickly. So we need to be aware of that as we talk about the topic of depression. But guys, to stay on track with the overall topic, I think that the basic concepts of what we've discussed up to this point are all things that people can easily grasp. And they're things that people can understand and typically do understand in regards to addiction. Something you might also likely know, but it might not be as common of knowledge for most people, is that humans are quite notoriously addictive by nature. We often hear people say that they have an addictive personality, and they do this in order to explain their obsessions or their relationships with particular activities or objects in their lives. But it's important to know that as humans, we tend to get addicted to the feelings associated with objects or actions, and we get addicted to the feelings from the experiences that we have. Now, these can be good experiences, or these can be bad actions or objects that our minds have given us a good experience perception of. And now, guys, I'm not going to dive into all the chemistry or psychology or genetics of addiction, but I do think it's important to note that there are certainly factors that make certain people and certain groups more at risk for addiction than others, whether that be their environment, past trauma, something to do in their mental psyche, or whatever that might be. That might be why we see people come out as having an addictive personality or claiming to have an addictive personality. That could be where that comes from. That's just a little bit of speculation on my part. And I don't say that to call these people out, but I say it to emphasize the danger of addiction and that we all need to be very mindful of the role it can play in our lives because we don't know exactly how it affects us until we're in it. So I think it's very important, guys, at this point to stop and take a look at our own lives. We need to ask ourselves a very important question. What areas of our lives have we formed unhealthy relationships or addictions in? Because we all have them, guys. And this can be an unhealthy relationship with many different things. These are things that we have had to deal with all throughout our lives, guys. I know I'm no stranger to these things. I've had my fights with alcohol, tobacco, sex, food, my job, and even the pain and stress and the depression around that as well, all as addictions. And guys, I could go on and on with that list over and over, but I'm not going to because I think y'all understand the point of what I'm driving home. And fortunately for me, guys, I have been able to overcome many of these different things in my life. And now there's no easy way to overcome these things, but every single time I've had to defeat an addiction, I've had to fight against an addiction, it started with me doing something very key. And that is coming to terms with the fact that I had a problem in the first place. I had to understand and admit that I had a negative relationship with whatever the issue was. And that if I didn't get control of this issue was going to keep me from reaching the goals that I had set for myself in my life. And guys, recognizing that negative relationship or that addiction is not always easy. But there definitely are some telltale signs that will give it away. Guys, these signs include that the fact that I could not go a day without being around that thing or the object or the action. Another issue that gave it away very quickly was if it was something that I defaulted to on a regular basis when I didn't have anything else going on. Whenever I found myself just kind of in a boredom or mindlessly doing something, it was typically associated with that issue that I had in my life. Number 3, it was something that I craved when I found myself in a stressful place in life. It was a coping mechanism that I had formed to deal with the problems that I had in my life. And then, guys, number 4, if it is something that I couldn't keep from partaking in, once I began to think about that, I knew that I had a bad problem with it or an addiction to it. That was something that once the idea came into my head, it wouldn't go away until I partook in that action or whatever unhealthy relationship that was. And guys, with that list of signs, I was able to recognize that I had bad relationships and addictions in many different areas of my life. And I was actually able to recognize that if I didn't get control of them, like I said, life was going to get very, very tough for me. And up until that point, guys, these bad relationships had already caused a lot of issues within my life. For instance, guys, A bad relationship with alcohol led me to having a dependency on it and using it to feel comfortable in any kind of social situation I found myself in. I also ended up using it as a way to cope with stress and with my emotions. Then, guys, a bad relationship with tobacco led me to blowing a ton of money on chew and feeling like any time I needed a pick-me-up in life, I had to put a dip in. And guys, we know that happens multiple times a day. We see people doing the same thing with caffeine and coffee. But that used to be a huge addiction with tobacco for me. And guys, a bad relationship with sex caused me to destroy past relationships and negatively impact the way that people looked at me, and just as far as being around groups of people. Then next, guys, a bad relationship with food and using it as a coping mechanism caused me to gain a ton of weight. And it also caused me to become way less active and, as a result, unhealthy. Then it made it really, really hard to break the cycle of being addicted to food as well, because it was something I had to have. Lastly, guys, the bad relationship I had with a job and the gratification that came with that job caused me to prioritize it over everything else in my life, and it caused it to be the only place that I could find validation being from that job. And as a result, I ended up putting that job ahead of everything else in my life. And guys, I think y'all get the picture. Y'all understand what I'm trying to say from these experiences I've had. These relationships and addictions led to much more stress in my life than they ever took away. Even though that in the situation, I felt like those were the things that were helping me deal with that stress and get through that stress. Guys, I can't emphasize to y'all enough the importance of recognizing those unhealthy relationships that you have and beginning to work on correcting them immediately. Because the longer you wait to see the issue with these relationships, the tighter the grasp they get on you. So guys, now that we understand how to recognize those addictions and those unhealthy relationships from the steps I listed above, it's important to utilize good strategy to combat and erase these unhealthy relationships and addictions. So guys, there's 4 ways that I like to do that as well. And number 1 is going to be to change your environment. We talk about that a lot in other situations as well when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to forming good habits. But in this situation, guys, you have to remove yourself from places that are conducive to that kind of addiction. If it's drugs, don't hang out with the people or in the places where drugs are likely to be used. If it's alcohol, don't go to bars or after work happy hours. Don't walk down the beer aisle at the grocery store. And don't hang out with people whose whole personality is made up of drinking. If it's sex, you've got to remove yourself from social media platforms where they tailor the posts that you see in order to tap into that sex appeal. Guys, you've also got to make sure you're hanging around with the right kind of people, not the people who are only talking about and only joking about sex. Then, guys, you've also got to go other steps with that and go further. Block numbers, block people on social media, etc. Do whatever it takes. And guys, if it's work, make sure you set parameters. When you pull out of the gate at work, work stays there. Home time is for the family and the rewards that you receive from being a good parent or a good spouse. And work time is for work and the satisfaction you get from doing that work. And there's no exceptions with this, guys. Lastly, if it's food, don't bring crappy food in the house, guys. Don't allow yourself to walk down the candy or the ice cream aisle at the grocery store, because it's just going to lead to extra temptation. And don't go to places that just primarily have bad food options, such as fast food chains. Guys, it is much easier to defeat an addiction or to defeat an unhealthy relationship with those different objects or actions whenever you remove them from your environment. Guys, number 2, put the energy that you put into that addiction or unhealthy relationship into something else. Find something other than that topic to occupy your mind. Because if humans are addicted by nature, like we talked about earlier, you need to find something productive to become addicted to. I talked about it a little bit earlier, and I mentioned it as a bad one, but it can also be really good. Go get addicted to the gym, or go get addicted to fitness and running and working out. Get addicted to progressing yourself and your family. Or you can be addicted to making good choices and feeling good about yourself whenever you help other people achieve their goals. Guys, find a way to take that addictive nature and put that energy into something that you can build a positive relationship with. Number 3, make sure you talk to someone. Guys, it's really hard to talk to people about our shortcomings. It's also very hard to deal with those shortcomings by yourself. You've got to choose your hard. Because while you think that coming clean to someone and letting them in on your issue that you're dealing with might be embarrassing, or it might be detrimental to your relationship with them, it could have the opposite effect, guys. It might actually bring you closer to them. And then they might be able to help you by sharing some of their past experiences of their own with dealing with these things, or at the very least holding you accountable and ensuring that you are progressing towards your goal of breaking that addiction and ending that bad habit or that bad relationship. And guys, it doesn't make you less of a man or less of a strong individual to ask for help. Then guys, the last step in this, number 4, know your limits. One thing that is extremely important when we're working on these unhealthy or addictive relationships is knowing what your limit is and where the line is that you can't cross. And that's different for everyone depending on what the object is and what the bad relationship is. For instance, if the bad relationship's with drugs or alcohol, it might be an absolute kind of situation for us. We absolutely cannot partake because once we start, we can't stop. Then on the opposite side, it might be a bad relationship with our job or food, which requires us to still partake in that topic because it's necessary for our survival, but it might require us to set certain boundaries associated with that, such as only eating things during certain hours or only working within certain hours and leaving it at the gate like we talked about in the last step as well. An additional step we can take to achieve the act of staying within those different boundaries, guys, is to plan our diets, to plan our work, to stick to that plan, and that allows us to help maintain our overall boundaries with that thing that we're addicted to as well, and it helps us to set our limits. So guys, I know it was quick, but in review, we talked about these signs that give an addiction or a bad relationship, unhealthy relationship away. And those are, number 1, if you couldn't go a day without being around it. 2, if it was a thing that you defaulted to whenever you don't have anything else going on. Number 3, if it was something that you craved and you found yourself in a stressful place in life, so you found yourself craving it as a coping mechanism. Or number 4, guys, if it was something that you couldn't keep from partaking in whenever you begin to think about it. And then from that, whenever we discovered what that addiction was or that unhealthy relationship in our lives, we talked about how we were going to beat it. And we also had 4 steps for that as well. And guys, number 1 was changing our environment, removing ourselves from situations that involve that particular action or that particular object. Number 2, putting that energy into something else, finding something productive to spend that towards, finding something we could put our own energy into that was going to have a positive outcome instead of the negative one. Number 3, talking to someone, opening up and being honest about it. It helps us to admit it, and it also helps us be accountable. It also might generate some advice that helps you move in the correct direction by those people that you're talking to. And then guys, number 4, knowing our limits, setting parameters, and staying within those boundaries. Guys, I know there's still so much more we could dive into to cover on this topic, but I think that's a really good starting point for this conversation. I know this topic's been tough for many people. It's been tough for myself as well, but I hope the information that we've shared today can help have a positive impact on your life. And guys, if it does, or if you find yourself struggling with anything that you're dealing with, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what we can do to help you out further. We're here to help you. Everything you say is anonymous. I'm not going to put anything out there. I'm just here to help and try to help you defeat whatever's next in line for you guys. So shoot us a message on social media. That's at Next in Line Development on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And be sure to give us a follow while you're there, guys. Now remember, y'all get ready to conquer this week. Happy Monday, and always be prepared for whatever is next in line.